Hello everybody and welcome to the Battle of the Rappahannock custom multiplayer game, Episode 8, Part 2. In Part 1, we reviewed the turns of 6 p.m. and 6:20 p.m. We saw the two sides reach parity in terms of their victory point losses. And we saw that Reynolds and McLaws were continuing to be pressured by enemy forces. It feels like whatever side can break their opponent first on the flank will be victorious in this battle. There is only one turn until dusk, which begins at 7 p.m. Dusk lasts until 8 p.m., at which point night falls. Both sides agreed that neither would act offensively during the 7:40 p.m. turn. Why? Well, the answer is long and technical, but the participants had their reasons. The bottom line, though, is that there are 3 full battle turns left to fight before night. So here we go. Are you ready? Turn number 46. And as you can see here, I'm going to highlight over in the top right the percentage points of how close these teams are to their limit. And after this turn, the two sides are no longer even. It's actually the Confederates who are closer to their limit than the Federals are. So what happened? Well, McLaws' left flank is being isolated. And we're going to zoom in on that part of the map there. Here we can see that Sims's brigade and Barksdale's brigade of McLaws' division are facing Ward's division and Newton's division of Sickles' Grand Division. The Federals are constantly getting around the Confederate flanks and isolating the regiments in these woods. All of these units here are now isolated. That's over 1,300 men now isolated on McLaws' left flank. The South Carolinians have been captured. If you recall, during the last turn, there were over 600 South Carolina troops isolated behind Federal lines. Those were captured during this turn, and the Federals continue to pursue the fleeing Confederates. In the center, though, it's the Federals that are falling back. The Confederates have pushed forward towards Tin Pot Ford, and the Federals have fallen back to the north. Bloody fighting in the east. This seems like a constant refrain that I've been using for the last few hours as these two sides battle it out south of Elkton. We're going to go ahead and zoom in on this area here and take a closer look. We have Reynolds' Grand Division, and to be honest, they're so mixed up at this point that I'm not even going to try to designate what these units are. Reynolds is just fighting for his life. For the Confederates, they have Pender's Division along this line. They have Early's Division on their flank, with Johnson's Division on the right flank. Hampton's cavalrymen are on the Confederate right, while on the opposite flank, Iverson and Doles' brigades from Rhodes' division are guarding Pender's left. But you can just toss all those labels out because, as I said, this fight is just two massed forces plunging into one another. For the Federals, they're really being pushed hard, and they've had to spike all these different artillery batteries as they've fallen back. It's better to spike your guns if you can't get them away than it is just to watch the enemy capture them. If you spike them, the enemy only gets half the victory points that they normally would get. This is a smart, veteran move by the Federal players. For the Confederates, they're having their own problems. As you can see, they've had numerous routes which have caused disruptions all along their lines. What I want to do now, though, is concentrate on this area right here. If you recall, during the last turn, I left it off with a bit of a cliffhanger. The Federals had 265 men on this slight elevation here, which were guarding 6 unlimbered guns. To their front were 850 Confederates who were fresh in this battle. And all the Confederates have to do is charge forward, capture those guns, and gain the high ground. Well, what happened? This is the field as it looks now, and as you might be able to immediately tell, the Federals still hold this area. The Confederates charged across the field, but the defensive fire from the Federals disrupted them before they were able to launch the melee. Therefore, the Federals still hold the high ground. It's really quite miraculous that they got so lucky. During their turn, they reinforced this high ground with some infantry and will continue to hold it at least for one more turn. Leadership losses continue to be heavy, but only for the Confederates. They've lost John Gordon and Joseph Kershaw this turn, both who were wounded in action. Going back to the overhead map now, we'll also take a look at all these units that are scattered behind the enemy lines, both the Confederates in the north and the Federals in the south. These units are searching for supply wagons, leaders, really anything that they can find during these evening hours. Moving forward now, we get to the end of turn number 47. And taking a look at the casualties, you can see that the lead for the Federals has increased just a little bit, as the Confederates are now at nearly 90% of their loss limit. McLaws' left flank is isolated, and I sound like a broken record, but it just continues to be a problem for the Confederates. They just can't get out of these woods, and during this turn they have more isolated units on their flank. And they've already lost Brigadier General William Barksdale, who was captured along with the 17th Mississippi during this turn. The Federals are now poised with this cavalry regiment to the south to sweep up to the north, block that road, and completely stop the escape of any Confederates out of this area. Things continue to go poorly for McLaws. But on the bright side, McLaws' other flank is largely safe now. Although they've taken heavy losses, the rest of McLaws' division has been able to fall back towards Brandy Station and are now starting to put a little bit of distance between themselves and the Federals. Wilcox and Rhodes begin to move to the east. This was part of the Confederate plan that they discussed during their last meeting, and that is to pull Wilcox and Rhodes to the east to reinforce Pender and Ewell's attacks against Reynolds. But at this point, isn't it already too late? With the percentages being what they are and the loss limit being within easy reach, to me, I'd be using everything I can to try to damage the enemy force as much as possible. Reynolds holds, barely. Again, I feel like I've said this a number of times over the last few hours. But let's once more zoom in on this area and you'll see what I'm talking about. Remember, it is dusk right now and there is a 4-hex visibility in place for both sides. Reynolds continues to hold this precarious line against the combined forces of Ewell's Corps and Hill's Corps. Reynolds has been forced to fall back on his left flank. He's had to abandon this high ground that he held during the last turn because he needed to find a way to try to form some sort of continuous line in order to block the Confederates from completely sweeping around his flank. On the opposite side, the Confederates have fallen back on their left flank. The Federals have launched a small counterattack in order to open up this road leading to the northeast. The hope for Reynolds is that he can somehow get his men on this road and, if necessary, escape that direction during the night. But until then, the bloody fighting just goes on and on in this area. And we are now at the end of turn 48. As you can see, the gap is closed just a little bit between the two sides. The rebels capture Star, but then get trapped. And this is really important, and so we're going to zoom in on that area there with the red outline. This is the start of the Confederate turn. And as you can see, there are 3 Federal cavalry brigades in this general area, with 1 Confederate brigade of cavalry opposing them. But you have to remember, it is dusk, and there is only a 4-hex visibility. So that means that all of that area there is completely unseen to the Confederates. All they see is a lone Federal unit sitting in their front. So aggressively, what are they going to do? They're going to attack. And by doing that, they're able to quickly capture that unit and, along with Major Samuel Starr, bag 273 men of the 6th United States Cavalry. But by doing that, there's now nearly 1,000 Confederate cavalry massed together in this single hex. And now, it's the Federals' turn. This is going to be a problem. And they're going to return the favor right back at the Confederates. They're going to swing at them with everything they've got in this area. And the end result of that is that the Confederate cavalry that just captured the Federal cavalrymen is now themselves isolated and in serious danger of being captured. Not only that, but McLaws, he gets hit even harder over in the woods to the west. Once again, you can see that there is just no escape for McLaws' units in these woods. They have nowhere to run, and the Federals are all over them. Heavy fighting as the sun sets. All across the battlefield, the two sides are throwing everything they have at each other. I think both know the end is near, and both are looking for that final knockout punch. All right, here we go now, and what is this? Wait a minute. You may have guessed it, we now have a Union victory. That's right, although they were being beaten senseless for about 2/3 of this battle, the Federals have found a way to come back, and they have earned a very, very hard-fought victory in the Battle of the Rappahannock. What happened? Well, with over 2,400 isolated troops who would be unable to move during the night, the rebels opted to concede the battle after the previous turn. This was the smart move, as the game assuredly would have ended during the first turn of dawn. Rather than making everyone involved in this game go through a number of night turns, the Confederates did the honorable thing and conceded the battle. And thus ended the Great Battle of the Rappahannock. But wait, there is still more to come. In the next episode, we're going to discuss what happened in this battle, because a lot of things happened which you may have forgotten and which all added up to this spectacular comeback victory for the Federal Army. We're going to review the casualties and how they compare to the other great battles of the Civil War. We're going to identify the key moments of this battle and figure out how they influenced the end result. Lastly, we're going to talk about what we can learn from this battle and what you can use from it in your own battles moving forward. All right, thank you for watching. I hope this has been an exciting journey for everyone. And as I said, we aren't quite done yet. So if you really want to get into this battle and talk about what happened on an analytical level, be sure to watch the final video coming up soon. Thank you.